We'll keep a track of what's transpiring there in Himachal, but shifting focus now to news coming in from the Supreme Court, where a big setback has come to the fore for the Enforcement Directorate Chief Sanjay Mishra. The Supreme Court has now come out and said that extension of his tenure is invalid. The Supreme Court, though, has permitted Sanjay Mishra to continue till the 31st of July. That is 15 days from now, a little over 15 days from now. 15 days will be enough for you to appoint a new director, is what the Supreme Court categorically told the central government. Big setback there coming to the fore, not just for the ED chief, but also to the central government. Ananya, my colleague, joining us, getting us more details. Now, Ananya, in 2021, the Supreme Court had directed the government that they cannot give any further extension to Sanjay Mishra. The centre had gone on to say that beyond November 2023, we will not extend it. But now the Supreme Court has stepped in once again and set a deadline of 15 days.
Well, definitely this is a big judgment coming in from the topmost court of the country. Three judges bench of the Supreme Court clearly ruling out that, Sanjay Mishra cannot continue till November. 31st July is the last day when, in fact, the ED chief can actually continue at this point of time. And what is very, very clear is that 15 days has been granted to the central government to actually continue to get a new chief for the Enforcement Directorate, very clearly holding that, the extension that was given out to, in fact, Sanjay Mishra to go on till November is something that is arbitrary in law and is invalid. However, the changes to the DSPE Act and the CVC Act, which allowed the central government to give an extension of 3 more years to a CBI or the ED director beyond that tenure of 2 years, is something that has been held to be valid by, in fact, the topmost court of the country. We'll try to understand. There is a lawyer who is connected to the case, and we'll try to understand if at all what the court had said and what has been stated by the court in its judgment.
Office till the 31st of July, is that correct?
Yes. That will be most like a stopgap arrangement. I think the court thought that we give time for the government to appoint somebody else, and that's why it extended him the tenure till 31st of July.
So what does that also mean for the fact that the court has not set aside the amendments? What does that mean for future ED directors? Does that mean that the next ED director
See, the amendments
get extensions as much as
we were not very much concerned with the amendments. You forget about it. Never anybody will get an extension of 5 years. This was, I don't know what he was about Sanjay Mishra, but this was on us. Everybody knows about it and don't need to talk about it. But otherwise, there's not going to be another example of continuous extension for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years after retirement.
सर हिंदी में एक बार बता दीजिए कि क्या आदेश है कोर्ट का?
क्या कहा है कोर्ट?
देखिए, ऐसा है, जो हमारी याचिका थी, जिस याचिका पे हम लोगों ने डॉक्टर जय ठाकुर की तरफ से जो याचिका थी, उसमें याचिका में हमने ये पॉइंट उठाया था कि इनका जो 2 एक्सटेंशन हुए हैं 2021 और 22 में, ये माननीय उच्च न्यायालय के पूर्व फैसले के बिल्कुल खिलाफ है। और चूंकि संजय मिश्रा उस पहली वाली पिटीशन में, पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट पिटीशन में पार्टी थे, इसलिए जब आदेश दिया गया हाई कोर्ट, सुप्रीम कोर्ट के द्वारा कि ये एक्सटेंशन इनको आगे नहीं दिया जाएगा, तो उसके बावजूद जो भारत सरकार ने अपनी सर्वोच्च न्यायालय के आदेशों की अवहेलना करते हुए उनको जो एक्सटेंशन दिया था 2021 में और 2022 में, ये अवैधानिक है, विधि के विपरीत है, ऐसा निर्णय दिया है आज सर्वोच्च न्यायालय ने। और ये कहा था कि हमने जो मैंडेमस इशू किया था उसको इस तरह से ओवरटर्न नहीं किया जा सकता। और पर उन्होंने
So this was, in fact, the advocate was speaking to us with regards to, how the ED director's tenure was illegally, extended by the central government, and the Supreme Court has clearly held that this extension of tenure is something that should not have been granted to Sanjay Mishra in this particular case. And clearly, but a big win for the centre as well, because the DSPE Act and the CVC Act amendments that the central government had actually brought in has now been affirmed by the Supreme Court, clearly saying that, the central government can actually give a three-year extension to, in fact, an ED director in this particular case, and or a CBI director more than their actual tenure of 2 years. And very, very clearly, what is clearly held is that, Sanjay Mishra, it is a big setback. He will have to step down from his post on July 31 in spite of his tenure being there till November 17 this year, but the Supreme Court clearly holding that this extension was something that was arbitrary, that was
Yes.
not right, and clearly holding that, since it's illegal, he will not be able to continue. Centre has 15 days to find a
Yes.
new ED chief, and that would be very, very interesting as to who would be coming in as the new, director of this federal
Absolutely.
program.
The Supreme Court has been very categorical in telling the central government that you need to find a new director for the Enforcement Directorate in the next 15 days. July 31st is the last date when Mr. Mishra will be in office. Ashish Mehershi, my colleague, also joining us, getting us more perspective on what this case really is. Now, Ashish, this was the third extension that was given to Mr. Mishra as the chief of the Enforcement Directorate, something that has now been struck down by the Supreme Court.
So, if you remember, there was an ordinance that was passed by the central government where the tenure was extended till 5 years. Now, usually the tenure was for 2 years, but there was an extension, but there was a change in the rule. And that basically allowed Mr. Mishra to stay there for a while. In fact, he was supposed to end his tenure on the 17th of November this year. But interestingly, if you see the argument that was given in the court in the last hearing, if you remember, the last hearing was very clear where the court was not very happy with the argument given by Tushar Mehta, who is supposed to be the Solicitor General and representing the Government of India. And the argument was that since the Enforcement Directorate represents in the FATF, and in FATF, this man holds a very important role because this is a global body which looks into anti-money laundering laws, and that is why his extension was granted. But interestingly, the court at that point of time, they find that, no one is indispensable, and that is why, the tenure has been curtailed. Now, this is today is 11, so he basically has around 15-20 days at Enforcement Directorate, and the Enforcement Director, the Government of India has to find the new director. But what leaves me a little surprised is that the ordinance is being challenged by the Supreme Court. If you see the ordinance, that very clearly stated that the tenure of the Enforcement Directorate director should be for 5 years. Now, does that mean, the order means that the 5-year tenure ordinance is struck down? It does not stay there? One. Another argument that was given by Prashant Bhushan, who was representing basically challenging the tenure or extension of tenure of Sanjay Mishra, they argued that most of the political personalities which have been arrested till now, 95% of them are basically from the opposition. That was the argument. And that was the argument, in fact, that has been the allegation of the opposition as well, that Enforcement Directorate and CBI and Income Tax was basically being misused against the political parties which were basically sitting on the other side, that is the opposition. So here, interesting debate.
Yes. It's interesting, the observations that have come to the fore from the Supreme Court. What is going to be the next move for the central government? We'll have to wait and watch out for. But for the moment, Ashish and Ananya, thank you so much for getting us the latest. On that note, slipping into a quick break, back in just a few minutes. Don't go anywhere.